and information before they did the peer review. And their scope was limited because of the amount of time that would be, and this is what they've come up with, their limited scope. The first thing that was interesting is they brought out the legislation, and they pointed out the legislation states that surrounding community agreements should compensate the town for infrastructure costs that might result from the casino development in a neighboring town, and they should also work to gain support in the surrounding communities. Here is the next few slides are the sections that they quoted. All right, why don't we go to the next one? In determining whether an applicant shall receive a gaming license, the commission shall evaluate and issue a statement of finding how each applicant proposes to advance the following objectives. Mitigate potential impacts on host and surrounding communities which might result from the development of the operating of the gaming establishment. Gaining public support in the host and surrounding communities which may be demonstrated through public comment and received by the commission or gaming applicant. Then, so they said, what is the purpose of the surrounding community agreement? So they sort of nailed it down on the legislation before they moved on. Then they discussed what is a surrounding community. I thought was very interesting is they pointed out the surrounding community status is gained when the application is filed on December 31st, or when a casino signs an agreement with a surrounding community. And what they said was that the Mass Gaming Commission is the final decision maker on who is a surrounding community. So even though we are right next to the casino, it doesn't mean we will be found to be a surrounding community. That will be decided by December 31st, or if we sign an agreement. Now, the importance of that is what we had. Yeah.
Well, it won't be decided. It would be decided. I just want to make sure we're technically correct. If the application goes in, we are not designated as surrounding community. 10 days from the date the application goes in, we have a window to apply for designation from the Mass Gaming Commission. Sometime after that 10-day window is when the Gaming Commission would make that determination if we do not have an agreement with MGM. And then if they find us to be a surrounding community, that would trigger that additional 30 days for negotiating.
So right now, we are not designated a surrounding community because we have not entered into agreement, and December 31st application has not gone in yet, and so that is still a decision that's out there. One of the things that we have discussed in a previous meeting was what Mass Gaming Commission has decided is a surrounding community and what they have decided in the past. And GPI's presentation went through that also, because GPI represents all the 8 surrounding towns to the casino. I think it was Wilbraham, Ludlow, East Longmeadow, Holyoke, Agawam, West Springfield, and Longmeadow. And Chicopee. Now, one of the decisions that has come down, and there hasn't been that many definitive decisions that have come down from Mass Gaming Commission, and that was the decision on, I always say the town wrong, Leominster. Fitchburg was found not to be a surrounding community, and Bolton was found to be a surrounding community. So GPI went through the analysis that the Mass Gaming Commission went through, because this is very important. If it's not found to be a surrounding community, there does not need to be an agreement, and there does not need to be mitigation payments. Fitchburg is very close. Is the next slide show the actual map? Here we go. In the middle of the bullseye is where the slots parlor, which is not a Category 1 casino, is. And Fitchburg, you'll see where Fitchburg is. Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know if this turns up on the LCTV, but that's the site. And then Fitchburg is, I believe, up here.
Over there. No.
Oh, over here? Oh,
there you go.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. So it is an adjoining community to Leominster. And
Bolton, show where Bolton is, which is farther down here. So if we're looking at actual distance, Fitchburg Bolton is, I would say, a little farther away.
Bolton is actually separated, but there's another town in here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an L town, I don't remember the name of it. But there's another town in between Bolton and Fitchburg, and I guess while I'm up here, the reason why Bolton was found to be a surrounding community was there's a state highway, a numbered state highway here that connects 495 to the site, and this gaming commission found that that would be a cut-through for casino traffic. Whereas Fitchburg did not have a direct cut-through route. And there were some other differences they highlighted.
And they pointed out, important part of the analysis was that if 117 gets backed up, they could see people cutting through the neighborhoods and sort of seeping throughout Bolton. Fitchburg's presentation emphasized public safety issues and also issues in regards to inspection of buildings and illegal housing. And they said they really were hanging their hat on the analysis of traffic. And GPI emphasized the importance of that.
The Gaming Commission focused on traffic as the issue of consideration, and that was something that I think all surrounding communities was a big lesson learned.
And I think it's important to realize there's two issues. One is a designation of surrounding community, and the other is measuring of your impacts that need to be mitigated. So the Mass Gaming Commission says in order to be their analysis of surrounding community agreements, designation is based on traffic. The other is something that we can also look at, which are impacts in other areas such as public safety, which Longmeadow is doing because they have an expert just based on public safety. When GPI did the evaluation of the actual traffic studies, there were 3 areas they looked at. One was timing, trip generation, and trip distribution. On the trip generation, means how many cars are coming through. Trip distribution is where those cars are coming from. In regards to the trip distribution, they didn't really make too many changes from where MGM's traffic experts were. They made a few adjustments, but when it came down to Longmeadow directly, they minused one area and plussed one area, and it came out to be about the same. What was a little different, though, was the trip distribution. They felt their modeling had decreased the amount of cars that are going to be coming in and out of the area by about 20%. One of them, and they had what the various models were, and they compared why they felt that 20%.
Yeah, said differently, they felt like MGM was low in their estimate of vehicle trips generated, and so their analysis was the numbers really across the board should be 20% higher from MGM's numbers.
And then the additional caveat they put on that is that in their brochures and in their presentation of this casino project, they've emphasized that there's going to be increased economic activity because the casinos are coming in. And whether that is the Big E, whether it's Six Flags or something else. So they said you might even be seeing more traffic coming into the area than even is being shown in regards to the trip distribution. Another interesting thing is they pointed out that their analysis is that the trip generation numbers should be higher than any of the other casinos they were looking at in Massachusetts projects and as well as Connecticut. So if you'll see the following charts, this shows the trip generation increases. Delta is their numbers. Shows the change. GPI vehicle trips. TEC is the MGM analysis. And the last category shows how many more trip generations they're really anticipating. Now, this shows what they feel compared to the other casinos, and as I said, they feel that the Springfield MGM project should probably bring in more traffic or trip generations than the Connecticut one.
Yeah, it's important to note the Connecticut DOT is the Department of Transportation's standard number that they have generated through an analysis of the existing Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun facilities in Connecticut.
They also went through the projection of the of the hourly vehicle trips and how they felt the Friday evening and Saturday midday, which would be very high, which substantially. Now, this is MGM's TEC initial analysis. They felt that plus or minus 20% would be coming up 91 through Longmeadow, and 3% would be coming up through Route 5. And if you see this compared to the other towns, want to give my little laser thing? Yeah. We are substantially higher in the way of trip generation than others. So 20%, 23%, East Longmeadow was 5.5, Agawam, they looked at 6%. When you add all of West Springfield together, it's about 12%. Chicopee is a little less than 11%. 1% in Ludlow and 2% out of Wilbraham. So Longmeadow has a substantial amount, and then Holyoke was 5.5%. Now that is MGM's initial studies and evaluation. Now this is GPI, or Pioneer Valley Planning Commission analysis. We're coming up to, can you do that? It's 23%. Which is about the same as what they had.
I think it's important to note, the next slide, Richard, has the vehicle numbers. And even though the percentages may look like they were down, the vehicle number, like what that 20% of trips on, say, I-91 translated into was 253 under MGM study. And if you go to the next slide, GPI estimated to be 286, so a substantial number of additional trips generated. And so these red numbers, if you go back and forth between the two, the black numbers were MGM's and the red numbers were what we felt GPI, or what GPI felt they would actually be.
And that's why we said that the trip distribution was about the same. The trip generation analysis was definitely higher with GPI's evaluation of it.
Maureen, can I ask a
Yes.
question? The numbers, the one that we were just on, of the actual number of trips, does that pick a particular hour and break it down as the distribution?
It's peak hour.
Is that the
Peak
Friday evening that we talked about, or what?
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's
Friday
what it is.
evening and Saturday midday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what they do. They look at the peak hours in terms of, in theory, the peak hour that they project is the worst case scenario at any given moment for trip generation.
And for the West Springfield that we were just talking about,
Mhm.
I see different arrows coming out of West Springfield. Are they counting the trip, people coming off I-90 as West Springfield? It's unclear to me which arrow that is, because people are obviously going to get off exit 4 and take I-91 down. Can you guys tell that?
Do you want to see, I-91 is
We have
not,
individual slides too.
Yeah.
we have individual slides for each town, but I-91 is not in West Springfield. It's on the other side of the river.
Mhm.
And so what those numbers are is access in and to.
They did not
Yeah.
count some of the interstate interchanges, but I think it's important, as Richard noted, there are the individual slides that break that down a little better are later in the
Okay.
report. I think it's important to focus on Longmeadow's impact because I'm not equipped to answer what their decisions or assumptions were on other towns.
But what I find interesting is that on what you're
Oh,
pointing out.
sorry.
Yeah, is that there are areas in West Springfield that, like 91, when you look farther up, they don't have a trip distribution issue there. And there are other areas that I'm surprised that they don't have counted trip distributions. Now, I think that Longmeadow advocated very strongly that we needed to count 91 as part of Long Meadow.
Right.
And the one thing I am surprised when I went in there is that they were not counting the Dickinson Converse access, and I know we had talked about wanting that to be.
Right.
And, but we have our own team that's going to be working on that. So I'm sure the other towns like West Springfield, they might also be looking at what they didn't get counted in their distribution.
I mean, I guess what I was getting at was, you know, if they think that 12% is coming from West Springfield versus the 20% that's going to come from all of Connecticut up I-91, it feels a little hard to believe.
Well, I think also that we have to look at the Bolton numbers. When you look at the Bolton analysis, and if you listen to that 1121, there is drastic difference between the casino project's view of trip distribution and numbers between the two. And they were both accepted, and then the analysis went from there. So I'm sure that there could be changes in regards to our experts when they come and look and say,
Right.
they're not really looking at 20%. The issue will be is Long Meadow. They're counting Long Meadow, and they're counting 91 going through Long Meadow as being part of Long Meadow, but they're not doing it in other areas. So I think they have to be realizing that if there is a backup on 91, there will be cut-throughs through Long Meadow. But when you look at West Springfield, if there's a backup on that, I'm not sure if people are really getting off on West Springfield and cutting through. So maybe that is the difference, or maybe it's just that our team really advocated to have that intersection considered.
The GPI did not express grave concerns with the trip distribution modeling. Like I said, the big adjustment was a 20% factor upward of MGM's generation numbers.
Right.
I specifically asked them about what they thought about the study, and they felt that the work done by TEC on behalf of MGM was, a good engineering study, a good traffic engineering study. Like I said, they took exception to some parts of it, but they did not see it as a fundamentally flawed thing. Which, so we're just reporting.
No, I get that.
What they gave us. So
Right,
I
no, I
don't want to get
understand.
into whether the numbers feel right or not. I think I think it's important to just say, here's what they said, here's what I think they're projecting for impacts, and I think the peer review went as a peer review goes, and to hear them say that they felt like the baseline study was a good one was somewhat reassuring, and I think that our experts are of the same mind. So.
I mean, if this isn't the forum to discuss it, we can have it another day. I mean, is it?
Well, let's go through the full
Oh,
presentation,
all right,
because
there we
the later slides might answer
Sure.
your question. Oh, okay.
That slide outlines how, and this is something of concern for us about whether or not Long Meadow traffic whether or not I-91 traffic is Long Meadow traffic. Because the state owns the maintenance and responsibilities by and large for the interstates, they look at any impacts to the interstate system as impacts that accrue to the state, not the municipalities. We know that in Long Meadow, our fire and ambulance service goes to the highway when there are incidents, and we also know that when traffic gets backed up on 91 for whatever reason in that area, it does have impacts on the local traffic on Long Meadow. And GPI did affirm that they believe that MGM should accept some responsibility for that spillover traffic into Long Meadow. The slide that we're just looking at just lays out that essentially, if that discussion of is I-91 traffic Long Meadow traffic, it's a discussion that we also need to have with the state as well as MGM.
And they also emphasize that Long Meadow should be really advocating to have the Massachusetts DOT do further modeling on 91. They pointed out, we call it the Long Meadow curve, they call it the entrance to the South End Bridge is at an F. I guess intersections and areas, traffic areas are rated A through F, and it's already at fail. And so when you start to put the extra traffic on, as people are trying to enter 91 from Long Meadow, they said the Mass DOT has to take care of that problem, and we really need to advocate and see further modeling and seeing what decisions are going to be made on that. On Monday, the Economic Environmental Impact Report is going to be presented, and that will include DOT will be probably making comments, and we should probably be making comments when that comes out also. Then they went to each individual town, and they described what areas they feel are a direct impact and what areas in the future should be looking at look-back areas. So let's move down to Longmeadow. Here we go. Okay, Longmeadow, they felt the direct impacts were 91, Longmeadow Street at Converse Street, Longmeadow Street at Forest Glen, and Converse Street at Laurel Street. And these, I think, were areas that they directly looked at. The look-back areas that they feel that we should probably start to consider and maybe get some baseline studies and be prepared is Converse Street at Dwight Road, William Street at Dwight Road and Maple Street, Longmeadow Street to the south, Shaker Road at William Street, Shaker Road at Maple Road. The list I gave you on my analysis, I think I messed those up a bit. But what they don't have here, which I think we should probably add to that list, is Converse at Dickinson, because that is a strong egress as well as ingress into Longmeadow. And the look-back locations, I believe our team is going to be looking at that. And they said they have all the counts they need, but they're going to be doing the analysis now.
Mhm.
Then they went through all the other towns, and let's see.
They did talk about, after they get to the communities, they then discussed a look back and what that means, and they clarified some of their earlier statements about how they view the look back. And I think there are obviously, they expressed some reservations about a look back only approach. It defers mitigation from at least 1 year after opening, which would not include any kind of mitigation of construction impacts, construction vehicles and things like that, which we may feel. They did encourage communities to be proactive. They wanted us to pay attention to different time periods, something that we've in our discussions have focused on. Our peak traffic times, our commute times, and we have pushed MGM for information on trip generation at 7 to coming out of spring, where are their employees going to be coming from? Or if they're going to be coming from East Longmeadow, are they going to be or Longmeadow, are they going to pass through at 7 to 9 o'clock in the morning, or just how many jobs they have in their new facility that are 9 to 5 jobs? Some way of projecting possible employee traffic. Rate of general traffic growth as well as other development projects is a concern they reiterated, and they encouraged us to look at specific projects as a part of this process, and then also look at not only just traffic congestion but also crash history.
The other thing they pointed out is they said how MGM says they're going to change and improve the economic development, and they've already made agreements with Six Flags. They're doing things with Big E. They said when you have the look back, the issue will be, are these impacts and this traffic, can they be directly related to the casinos or to other things happening in the area? So when you go to the look back, that might be an argument that going forward you're going to have to prove. The other point that was anything that is not you cannot show directly related casino development. You'll have to look at that special fund. And so the look back negotiations, my understanding, will be a little more complicated than just gathering the data and showing changes. Any questions on the presentation? Or Richard, was there anything, you could turn it off now, anything you wanted to add? Because Richard was there last night and did ask numerous questions.
I have just one thing to say. To get over my
Thank you for helping with the computer.
Invisible select board member.
Yeah, the only thing I did want to mention, it was mentioned that the 20% factor, and there was a reason that MGM gave for that 20% factor. There was two factors, which I thought was quite odd. One is the fact of the no smoking law in our state, so they discounted their projections 10% for that one factor, and the other one is it was an urban casino, as opposed to a remote one. Apparently, they took another 10%, saying a lot of people would not go downtown to a casino where they may go to the Mohegan Sun, they wouldn't go to this one. Two interesting points, and of course, that must be something that they're aware of from their casino operations, but that makes up to 20%. Each factor was a 10% discount.
I think that the 10% on the urban casino is also tied to, they felt like they would get some people from the urban core going to the casino. So not every, like a resort casino that's off in, Native American land in Connecticut, there's only one way to get to it. You have to drive to it. Whereas there are other ways of getting to this casino besides vehicle. And I think that GPI correctly, I think, disagreed with both of those down gradient assumptions.
Yeah, but I mean, I just thought we'd explain what they were. They didn't arbitrarily inflate their figures 20% or this, that, or the other. There was a reason given for those two factors, which we can debate, but I don't have the knowledge to debate that issue.
And what GPI said they don't do is they don't figure, they were going to give us the numbers, they did the peer analysis of their numbers, but they're not going to tell us what those costs are. And they don't even, the closest they came to recommendation of infrastructure change is they said you might want to consider changing your traffic signaling equipment, updating it so you can do more adjustments or coordination of lights on Route 5. But that's something that our Parsons group should be able to do, is come out with letting us know what the actual cost of these impacts will be, and maybe recommendation of changes that we need to do in town to prepare for the traffic. So right now, I think we left with our next step in regards to GPI was recommending that we see what happens in the environmental impact report that's coming out on Monday, that we work well with our current group, and maybe advocate for some changes with Mass DOT in regards to 91, because I think all of us know that that's pretty key in what's going to happen on the north end of town.
One of the things I think the report from GPI did a good job of for the purposes of assessing what an agreement could be was establish some level of comparative value amongst the surrounding communities in terms of impacts, and that gives us the traffic impact. I think three factors that we heard about last night. The MGC's focus on traffic as a predominant impact in their analysis of the Leominster surrounding community decision. And that's something that Marie had reported on at a previous meeting as well, and that GPI affirmed, I think, what you had said about it. So that factor combined with the projected traffic impacts of the communities, comparing apples to apples for impacts, and then the emergence of some of the surrounding community agreements that MGM is entering into, I think are three things that are somewhat in play as we consider our status as a surrounding community, as well as what we envision for a surrounding community agreement.
One of the things we discussed was GPI, where we would be with that, and GPI said that they would help us. They would discuss further the possibility of expanding their scope if we felt we needed them to report, if we needed to advocate that we are a surrounding community. That's a strong possibility that we will have to go in front of the Mass Gaming Commission to argue that, or if we end up in arbitration, if we're unable to come to an agreement, they would also present their data for our argument. But again, at one meeting they said that would not be a problem. The other is I think they have to talk to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to get that next step for us.
Oh, there was another, can I speak on another factor? There
Yeah.
may have been confusion, sitting from my position. The figure that was given at about the 256 vehicles, wasn't it? or 258, somewhere in that.
286, who's?
Well, it
GPIs?
does- Yeah, GPIs, it was
GPIs.
286, but
286,
GPI. Yeah, I want to make sure everybody's aware that that's the traffic that will be on I-91, not coming down to the middle of Long Meadow.
Yeah.
There is some traffic that will be in Long Meadow, I forget what, 50-some trips or something up the north end of town, but in case I-91 becomes blocked, then that traffic will flow through the town, and that, I think it broke down to about 4.7 vehicles per minute going through town, if all those projections are accurate during the rush hour period. So they're gauging that as the max event on us.
Yeah, the 286 is the delta.
Yeah.
It's the increase, which
Right.
amounts to 20% of the existing traffic, which
Right.
is substantial. 286 on a highway may not sound like that much, but
Yeah. It's
You-
4.7 vehicles
Yeah.
per minute.
the 20% is what grabbed me. That's a
Right.
lot.
But I think it's interesting, though, that there is possibly some percentage that both of these studies are off. The real figure is somewhere between the two of them likely.
Well, we'll see
Somewhere
what
it is.
Parsons says.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see what the
Parsons
final
should be very
outcome is.
interesting. But that's why I think what's going to happen on 91 as right near that exit, if that is not taken care of, anything that's coming up 91 is going to start backing up. And then the worry is people taking their GPS and saying, okay, how am I going to get out of this mess that it's coming up to? So I think that the advice by GPI for us to talk to Mass GOP is pretty important.
DOT.
DOT, yeah. And the other thing is, of course, in the middle of all this is am I saying the word right, viaduct? If they're really going to be making some construction on there in the next 2 or 3 years, like the governor said, they're going to, how that will affect the ability to take 91 directly into the casinos. Is there anything, now, again, every select board member can send any of their lists of questions or concerns directly to Parsons, who's doing the evaluation. The other expert on the team is, I know him as Don, what's the name of his group, the public safety?
It's Don Jutton, Municipal Resources.
Municipal Resources. And though the Fitchburg was actually severely punished for going after the public safety aspect of it and concentrating on things other than traffic, I think it still is important that Municipal Services does that analysis for us, because that's probably where a lot of our costs are going to be. So any select board member can send those to them as well as to the team.
Is this a good time to ask questions?
Oh, definitely,
Okay.
anytime.
Let me see, I think either you or Stephen mentioned that the GPI study was limited in scope due to the time that was available.
Yes.
Did they explain how it was limited in scope due to time?
Yeah, when they first came out, they said that the delay was the Mass Gaming Commission did not release the funding for 3 weeks.
Right.
That was their explanation.
But I mean, what haven't they
Oh,
done?
the additional
because-
intersection analysis that we had asked for previously did not get done. as a
That's what
result of
they're
the
saying.
timing, yeah. And I will say this, that I don't know what other communities asked for, but they did some level of analysis to identify intersections and other roadways as things that should be looked at in the context of a look back. I mean, they did not reject the look back concept entirely, and I don't think, quite honestly,
They being. I'm sorry.
GPI.
Okay.
They did not disavow it completely, and I think intuitively we've always felt a reopener of some description would not be unreasonable in an agreement like this. But that doesn't mean you can't have knowable and predictable impacts up front that you're mitigating up front. So they said they sort of split the difference and identified things in each community that were issues that they should focus on for upfront mitigation. And for us, it's that traffic on I-91 and impacts that delays at that level of service F, the off-ramp to go to West Springfield would cause for our town, plus the 5% traffic, or the 3.5% traffic that would be on our local roads anyway. But then they also said, here are that additional list of intersections that you should do additional counts on and set baseline figures, and monitor for for a look back. So they didn't just ignore those other intersections. They did, because I'm going to guess that some towns said, what about this other intersection? And they said, it's really not going to be impacted.
So the additional impacts, I thought this was something that MGM said it would study, and then it didn't.
They had said that they were going to study, and then
I'm
they
sorry,
didn't.
who's the they?
MGM had said that they were going to have tech
Right.
do the additional analysis. They did not do the additional analysis because of the delay with the funding.
I'm sorry. GPI didn't do the additional.
No, tech did not do the
Because you keep using the
September.
word they, I'm not sure who the they is.
Sorry, tech.
Okay.
MGM.
Tech did not do the additional.
In September, I think we were told,
Yeah.
you were there, we were told that they were going to do additional intersections.
Right.
Tech was, on behalf of MGM.
Yeah.
Then, for the reason we were given was because of the funding mechanism at the Gaming Commission was delayed. That tech could not perform that data, and they were going to basically work with GPI and the local communities on that. But then, when it came down to it, GPI did not have time to do it as well.
Well, how could they? I mean, GPI was doing a peer review of what Tech was doing. So if Tech never looked at the
Yeah.
additional intersections, it wouldn't have mattered what the release date,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the picture changed on that subject, unbeknownst to us, pretty quickly.
No, I just can't even figure what happened. I mean, because.
To some extent, it's water over the dam at this point, and I think that's why we're lucky to have our own team on board that's ready to do what they need to do to make sure that, because Parsons, our team may assess that there really isn't much more analysis that needs to be done because those intersections may not be impacted based on our local knowledge of distribution, or they may decide that we need to do the extra analysis. But I think we're in a good position to be proactive as GPI recommended.
And I think that MGM has taken the approach now that these studies don't matter because they really are saying we want to look at the look back. And so when we say we want to look at the studies, they're saying, well, the studies are just giving us a skeleton view and
projections.
for the projections.
Right.
And we really feel we want to look at only the look back. So I think that is their approach, and that's why they are encouraging, and they have signed agreements before December 15th. I mean, December 5th, they wanted communities to sign before GPI came out with their analysis, before the environmental impact, and so they would say they might not have studied these intersections, but that's not what's important right now. And Long Meadow's taken the approach that we feel we do want to hear from our team and our experts.
I think the analysis shows that there are two tiers, really, or two groups of communities when you look at the traffic impacts. That there is a group of possibly 3 communities that are impacted much greater than
Right.
the other tier of communities. I think it's evident from the findings of GPI, based on their review of MGM's work, that we are in that tier of communities that is more affected. And I guess I would probably fairly say West Springfield and Agawam, possibly, or Chicopee is also one. I mean, they did not define those tiers for us, but publicly, but we have had those conversations.
Right.
So, and I think, and this is just an editorial opinion, but I think you will see a direct proportionality between traffic impacts and the value of surrounding community agreements.
Right. Just a few other questions. The trip distribution, did GPI address what impact MGM's withholding of allegedly proprietary data had on their ability to get behind MGM's trip distribution analysis?
Well, I'll tell
They
you what I
didn't seem
heard.
to be, they
Yeah,
didn't
it
seem to be
seem
just disturbed by the marketing
Yeah.
issue. And they did mention this is based on MGM's marketing data, but they didn't seem to be too concerned
So,
about
so they
that.
didn't really, I mean, did they say, we don't care what it says, or they just didn't say anything at all?
No, they did, they
It was a
mentioned.
gravity
yeah.
model that they analyzed it with, and they had, don't forget, they
I
had
know,
the.
but did they specifically address this information that MGM's withholding?
Not in a manner that would indicate that it was a barrier to doing a good study.
They
I don't know
said-
how to answer that
yeah.
question.
Okay, I mean, if they, it's just a question.
It was
I mean-
not a big deal to them. They did,
Yeah.
yes, they addressed it. No, it was not a big deal.
Because I think they said they were able to look at
Mhm.
the outline of it, and everything seemed to be falling into place. They did not feel that there was anything that was lacking in their ability to analyze the material.
They did have the opportunity to meet, not the, on the opportunity, they did meet before they gave this report with all of the communities, including Long Meadow. And I can't speak to what the other communities did, but we certainly told them what we felt the distribution would be. So they were aware that there were other, opinions out there on
Right.
distribution, and I think they looked at it. And the lead of the study is from Agawam, so there was institutional knowledge of this area in terms of approaching the study. So, in fact, they did make an adjustment to the trip distribution was it West Springfield or Agawam, when they said more traffic was going to go down towards a different bridge.
Yeah, they were talking about Agawam and
Yeah.
West Springfield.
Yes,
Yeah.
in that area. So they did make adjustments to some of the trip distribution stuff. They did not for
But they,
Long Meadow.
but, all right, this information,
Mm-hmm.
so are we getting, is GPI presenting a report, or is this it?
That's it.
That's it. Now, our
I
team
mean-
is going to be following up with GPI
I
next
mean,
week.
does a reporting, this is a PowerPoint. Do they actually have something, with paragraphs and words and,
A narrative? I don't know that they've
I mean, like,
generated a narrative
usually a
report.
PowerPoint is a sort of a summary of a larger, more complex document.
I would
So we're not
imagine-
getting any.
I would imagine they wouldn't. They said this was hot off the press. They said they literally just finished this and brought this in. And I don't think that they're going to do a full report unless we need it. And they said in regards to if we need it in a presentation, because they were doing it for 8 communities, and if Agawam's already signed, they're not going to need to do Agawam. Ludlow's signed, they don't need to do Ludlow. So, but if it comes time that we do need something specifically for our town, and I think Parsons will probably tell them, we need this analysis, then it will go. But what I was pleased to see that Parsons representatives there were able to speak directly to GPI, and GPI was very open
Right.
on what they were doing. And so I think that's really going to be the important report we're going to need to
Yeah.
come out
I mean,
of
they
this.
did look at, they didn't just look at a PowerPoint. They didn't look at MGM's PowerPoint.
No,
They did
no, I
their PowerPoint.
get
I mean,
that.
They drilled down into the report.
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's not
Behind
in
each
here.
slide, yeah.
Right, and I'd like to see that.
Well, I think
Um,
it's important to see Parsons.
True,
Yeah.
but if we've been hanging our hat on PVPC's report, and, I'm just looking at a few slides here.
Mm-hmm.
If we're on our own, we're on our own, but.
But I think it wanted to, I think the intent of this, just about every traffic study that usually ends up to get reported in such a way that people who are impacted can understand, ends up in this format.
Okay. I don't know, this feels very dumbed down, but, let me see, one of the other questions I had was did GPI talk about, I know you made a point about, it's the state's responsibility for I-91, correct? One thing that I've been concerned about is not so much, obviously, if traffic gets redirected on our roads themselves, that's a big deal. But let's say you have a backup on I-91, that's going to affect our roads, even if that I-91 traffic stays on I-91. Did GPI attempt to measure that effect? Do you know?
They did not specify that measurement, but they were explicit in saying they do believe that is a likely scenario where it's not a rollover or something that the highway's closed and we're diverted. It's just congestion and cars jumping off either going north or south to try and cut through Long Meadow to avoid
No,
some
but not
traffic.
even that though. I'm talking about just the fact that it slows traffic. I mean, like, you know,
They specifically said they feel that is the biggest problem.
Okay.
And that's the area I was telling you about, and they said that's where we need to put our concentration. And when the Bolton analysis went through, that was one of the things they said. 117 gets backed up, and not only are you going to have people flowing through to the neighborhoods,
Right.
but the local residents will not be able to use their local roads.
right.
And
we
so
see
I
that
think,
already.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
so, if
times.
anyone who's driven on 117 in Bolton, that's where my grandson is, so I'm spending time there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's going to be a serious problem. So
Yeah.
what you're describing is, I think, what GPI pinpointed at the end. Long Meadow, this is your problem, you better sit down with Mass DOT, because if they
Right.
don't solve that problem, this is gonna be our biggest problem. And it won't be casino people trying to get to the casino, it's going to be Long Meadow residents trying to use their own roads.
So, I mean, this description of that, I mean, you're saying GPI identified as the biggest
Yes.
thing. I mean, like, I see one slide, I mean, is there any more? I mean, there just doesn't seem to be much substance in this,
Well, I mean, a lot of
Discussing
it was
that.
his narrative.
It
what he
was
was
verbal, yeah, narrative.
talking. Okay.
Well, I think if Parsons is gonna take the ball and start running with it, and
Yeah.
if they need to, if they want to have a, what do you call it? Quote or use GPI statistics in their final report, I'm sure they will. But the one thing I found is that GPI is just sort of giving us a general view of the region. And thankfully, this board decided to get their own traffic experts, and I think we're the only towns to do that. So we'll be able to really drill
Yeah, I
down
would-
into it.
I haven't helped anybody who's relying on this exclusively. Did, some of the slides seem to be like marketing from MGM. Did they say what the relevance of that was?
That
Or-
was them basically using MGM's words against them to suggest that MGM says that this is going to stimulate broader economic development in Springfield. Well, and they didn't offer a way to quantify it because, quite frankly,
GPI or?
GPI did not
yeah,
offer a way to quantify because they said that you'll get an argument as to whether that traffic is a result of that additional development or not,
Right.
and is MGM responsible for that traffic under the statute? These are all, questions that could be possibly be settled in court down the line. But they just noted that an impact of their development, by their own words, is additional economic development and growth, which means likely additional traffic. And so GPI just wanted to make the communities aware that that's something they should be mindful of too, especially if MGM wants to look back.
Well, MGM has said that, I was looking at the transcript of the November 7th meeting, and one of their guys for MGM said, there's a temptation to understate traffic. We don't want to do that because we're going to have traffic. If we don't have traffic, we're not successful, and we want to be successful. So I guess that,
But the consequence of this, and I think this is what GPI was trying to point
Yeah.
out, is that when we do see, let's say we get more than 256, was that the number, coming up through there, or the numbers are substantially larger, they're going to say it's an unintended consequence or unknowable consequence of general development in the area, which means you've really got to go to the special fund and try to get your mitigation costs.
I'm sorry, say that again, I didn't quite follow.
One of the things the legislation has set up is that there's a large fund of money, and I keep
Right.
thinking 200 million, that's set aside that every town in Massachusetts can go to if there's any consequence, or we're able to anticipate the consequence. And what they're going to say is, we anticipated 256, we didn't realize there was going to be a whole new economic development, and that really is not the casino, so you really have to go to the fund. Do not come back to us in 1 and 5 years. So that, I think, could be something that we would have to argue against, or the other way to look at it is the legislation has prepared for this possibility, and we will have somewhere to go for funding,
For
additional funding.
other economic development,
Yes. Mhm.
under the theory that this MGM casino is going to
Mhm.
sprout new businesses.
New businesses, exactly.
So here, I mean, this is kind of a commentary on my part, but it's also a question. something that we've all been talking about is the disparity between what MGM is saying about this northbound traffic from Connecticut
Mhm.
and what Penn National said.
Right,
like 20 versus 40.
right.
And, as I look at these percentages, it's really kind of astounding how much they think they're going to get from Springfield itself, because the gaming statute envisioned resort, like, you use the word resort. In order to be this type of license, you have to be a resort. You have to be a destination resort casino. If they're saying they're going to suck 20%, 26% that you're going to get more gamblers from Springfield than you are from Southern Connecticut. It's almost like they're admitting failure on that point.
Well, that's
And-
where the one-year look-back will actually help us, but the question is, what is the cost to the town for us to be continuously doing counts and monitoring all this? And we
Right.
have to consider what those costs were going to be, but the first year, we should be really seeing where the true trips are being, distribution is.
I'm just very suspicious of this information that MGM is holding back in light of the disparity with Penn National, in light of how at odds what they're describing for their trip distribution is with the whole purpose of the license. I think if you had, some folks under a lie detector test, they wouldn't be saying 20% from Connecticut. I think they'd be saying a lot more. I'm sure they're hoping for that.
Their marketing materials say a third of their target market is Connecticut.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
They want people from West Hartford coming up. They want people from affluent suburbs coming up. I guess that makes me really want to see that allegedly proprietary data.
I don't think the proprietary data is really their marketing approach. And what they're doing, when we come down to this, they're doing their analysis. We're doing our analysis. Just with Bolton, the numbers are probably going to be drastically different. And then it's going to go in front
But if we don't have
of.
the information, then
In other words, what they're basing their decision on 20 doesn't really matter, because we're going to base our number on what we believe the correct generation is, and then it's going to go, and
But
we're
how-
going to come to an agreement. But I don't think that, I don't think that this makes it so we can't go forward on what our analysis is. Their analysis is their analysis, and I think that we'll be able to do our own analysis. And one of the things that I think GPI said and Parsons said is that you really can go around and look at what the possibilities are and then do our own decision on where we think our trip distribution and generation is. I think there was a 20-point difference between Bolton's numbers and the casino's numbers out there. So I'm not too hung up on what they haven't given us. They've done theirs, and we're going to just do ours. And then the issue will be if we can come to an agreement in the middle.
I do want to clarify, though, that, Parsons' job now is going to be looking at solutions.
Yeah,
A mitigation agreement
costs.
isn't going to pay us per car.
Yeah.
You get to the point now where if you have additional traffic, whether it's 100 additional cars or 500 additional cars, you have to look at how do you do things to the roads, the traffic
Right.
signals, the whatever, to mitigate the impact of those cars. We can try and discredit MGM and GPI studies all we want. That isn't actually going to get us down the road to identifying problem-solving tools that we can have that Parsons Brinckerhoff will help us with.
why did we do this at all then? If getting to the number doesn't matter.
I don't think I just said that. And
I
now
think
I feel
you
like
did.
now I feel like you're trying to discredit what I just said. I'm just saying we have MGM's numbers. The peer review is done. If Parsons says that they feel like GPI was way off, then that's something that we will
But they might not know
address.
that if they don't have the data. What if this proprietary data says, you know what? The economic model of this casino depends on 40% of our traffic coming from Connecticut.
Well, that's where
That
some
would be a
level-
useful
yeah.
fact.
Right, but
right?
that is
would
where
be a
some
very
level of look back.
That would be No. In our arbitration that we're gonna, or we may have, wouldn't that be a real good fact to have? Right? I mean, why wouldn't we be
It would have been
pushing
nice
for
to
that?
have, we did ask for it, but we
Well, and
don't
then
have it.
what we should be, I just think we should be continuing to push for it.
But I'm just saying, at some point in time, we do have to look ahead and just decide
Right.
on certain solutions to traffic impacts.
Now, and one question I have on that is, MGM has proposed this net impact, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Net adverse impact, yeah.
right, and what they're trying to count is positive social effects.
I don't buy into that either.
No, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Economic.
So, if we're gonna be if at any point we're forced, or we do buy into positive social effects, then we should be looking at the negative social effects of, say, town residents sitting in traffic.
I completely agree with you on that, but I don't, like I said,
I don't think that's what they're talking about, though. I think when they talk
Who's
about
the
net, MGM, when they say net adverse impacts, I think what they're doing is they're looking at, let's say, they have an agreement with Six Flags. Six Flags produces this much more taxes for the town of Agawam, and we will compare to what the costs are. So you're getting this much more tax revenue in compared to what the costs are. And then I think that's the type of
Well,
analysis
maybe,
they're doing.
I mean, but they talked about jobs, for example,
Mhm.
like, I mean, I think it's wonderful to have more jobs, but what effect does that have on
Yeah.
town government?
in terms of, I agree with you, Alex. I think the one thing I'll say is the statute and the regulations governing this stuff do, I think, give them the foothold to say mitigation includes positive impacts as well. I
No,
believe that.
actually, it doesn't say that.
All right, maybe not. So, however, a additional business for our small commercial base isn't going to repave a road. We bear 100% of that cost.
Right.
And I think Longmeadow is unique in that since we don't have a lot, I don't know of any industrial or manufacturing, and we have limited commercial, kind of crossover economic development opportunities are limited here. We're housing essentially.
Right.
And so I think like I said, each surrounding community is different. I mean, ultimately we are, and we can say this now, we have 2 surrounding community agreements, and I bet you by week's end we have 4. It's a sum of money is what we're talking about. That is how these things are being traded on, is dollar amounts. And what are the values of those dollar amounts? And that's the moment we've been working towards, these many months, is an agreement over a sum of money. And like I said, I think I reject the concept that we should be somehow saying that net positive impacts are going to somehow reduce our costs, direct costs for improvements for whatever the mitigation thing is, additional police officers, whatever we decide we need.
Right.
And so that's something we have to communicate with MGM, and I think to some extent we have in various formats at various times.
Right. Because what they want to do is they want to calculate positive effects broadly
Mhm.
and calculate negative effects narrowly,
Mhm.
you know?
Maybe. We're not sure
No, they've
where
already
there's
said
going to
that.
be analysis
I mean,
will
they've already
be.
said
Well,
Because
that-
Longmeadow is, we can't say how many accountants and lawyers get jobs out of the casinos, because then the analysis can't be there, because how many people have lost jobs? How many local businesses have problems? So I think that will be very difficult for them to argue in regards to Longmeadow, the positive effects economically. But right now, I think what we need to do is start focusing in, which we don't have the information yet, is we all agree, and we've made a list of what the negative impacts will be, and how do we quantify that? And what is our ask? What is our counteroffer? And I think that's what this board has to start struggling with.
And question, have we, the thing that we voted on last month about getting together with other surrounding communities, are we any?
I spoke to several of the other communities, and I didn't see too much of an interest at this point in time.
Can we send out an official invitation? I mean, because that is what we voted for.
Yeah, I'll send out the official invitation. I don't know how many people will be wanting to get together on this. I have been reaching out to other towns and, the council members, and at this point in time, we can do that, but I have a strong feeling after the presentation by GPI and especially the analysis of what Mass Gaming Commission is doing in deciding who surrounding communities are and who is not getting the designation, there's going to be a lot of agreements made in the next week.
Yeah, I would concur that based on, and we've spoken to other communities and went to West Springfield, and I think all the surrounding communities were represented last night. I mean, I believe there was a unification moment, say, 6 weeks ago, but I think that moment has passed, and it's every town for themselves, I think, is.
It's too bad we didn't seize it at that moment.
Well, I think we tried to, but again, the other dance
What
partners
did
were
we do,
reluctant.
though?
Well, we had discussed individually with the communities about doing that, and really the feedback was lukewarm, so we never really approached it in a formalized way. You're right about that.
And we will send out the invite and try to see who wants to come in and share information. I know West Springfield, and Springfield has done that and sent out notices, and we have been attending all of those meetings
We should
and
provide
sharing
sandwiches.
information.
More people will come if you give sandwiches.
Is that it?
I don't think there's going to be any appetite for meetings now. They're into the process now of signing agreements. And there really wasn't much of an appetite 6 months ago, or whenever we attended that first meeting up in Ludlow, because there was no appetite for meetings at that point. There was a lot of opposition to getting together. Everybody wanted to do their own thing. Because it seemed like everybody was afraid that somebody else was going to get the upper hand on, and it.
It's too
That-
bad
that-
because, I mentioned this before, the Hopkinton group, they got 4 towns together. They were very effective.
Yeah.
Each town-
Somebody's got to lead it, so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I never saw any of that from any other community. In all the meetings, conversations, I wish it were different. I wish it were different.
Didn't Wilbraham, I was a couple months ago in the newspaper, Wilbraham sort of said, like, we want to get together with other.
They said they wanted to talk to other communities.
Yeah.
Because they felt like other communities were, get advice from other communities, like Long Meadow, because Long Meadow was further ahead than most other communities.
Yeah, that would, so it felt like that was an olive branch.
And right, and honestly, I have had conversations, and I'm sure all of you have had conversations with people from other communities, but in terms of a more formalized coalition, I agree with Richard. I never saw a great appetite for it, and the process inherently was going to pick up, MGM's process was essentially going to lead to the picking apart of a coalition, because the impacts on communities was so vastly different that it's easy, and I don't want to, a town that clearly has minimal impacts based on their own information and other information would be more enticed to sign an agreement that may seem less than they could originally thought they could get, because they run the risk of not being designated surrounding community and getting 0.
Right.
So going forward, any specific requests? I know that, Stephen, you said you're going to contact the Mass DOT. We're expecting to hear from Parsons as well as Municipal Services next week, and then conversations will occur with each of the select board members and the legal team. I'm setting up meetings for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in preparation, so we will just be ready to meet as soon as we do get the information. Any other recommendations from the
as a
board
next
or
step,
Stephen?
I don't want, obviously, you received a document from the attorneys, of a matrix, if you will. I guess what I'm going to do is use that as a first blush to go through and see, are there things in there describing other agreements that we think would be beneficial to Long Meadow for my own sake, and I would encourage the board to do that, because I think, there's no precedent for the process, as we've said many times. Is it likely that surrounding community agreements will start looking like each other? I mean, some of them are very similar now, and is that something that we need to be mindful of? I don't know, but we may want to prepare for that. Because like I said, we are building towards an agreement, one way or the other.
And so I think to start the communications, each select board member, if you have questions of the team, to send those out because they're in the middle of the analysis or any concerns, and start putting together what you feel are really important parts to have in the agreement. And we'll just keep up the process of posting our meetings as well as everyone having their individual conversations, since we cannot deliberate together.
And our experts are going to come in and brief us, is that correct?
Are they going to brief us as a group or brief us individually, because it's proprietary information, and it will probably have to be each individual board
Yeah, I
member?
mean, I'm of the belief that they should brief individually, and as we said before, it's not to hide information from the public, but the data and the recommendations are really what informs our strategy, our negotiating strategy, and I'm of the belief that doing that in open session severely hamstrings our ability to, or let me say this, it gives the upper hand to MGM to be able to know our strategy before we go back into the negotiating table.
Okay, well, I'd recommend that maybe we have meetings with two members at a time then.
That might
So we can
conserve.
at least have a little bit of swap of ideas there while the people are in front of us.
And maybe conserve the time of the experts, yeah.
Very much
That's a
so.
good idea. But first, people will probably want to have a written analysis so they can understand where
Yeah,
they
right.
are before we sit down and have those meetings. So
Well,
I think, yeah.
I mean, that was something we were discussing last time. I had kind of, I still, this is sort of what I was getting at. I mean, to me, this isn't much of a basis to, I really need to read something, and I'm looking forward to reading MGM's environmental impact study. I'm looking forward to reading our reports. But I think what Mark was suggesting was that before they sort of go pen to paper final document,
Yeah.
to discuss with us. So I don't know if we had decided on that or not. I mean, but I think there were sort of different ideas about it.
Well, I think there's
I
two
don't know how-
reports, isn't there? There's going to be a first report, and then,
Well, the report from Parsons is what that's going to look like is taking shape as we speak. We didn't have a clear sense of what their scope of work was going to be, because it was going to be to some extent tied to what we heard from GPI last night. They now have a clearer sense, but I have not addressed with them how the format of the report is going to look. I have had discussions with MRI about the public safety report. So there are two separate disciplines that are being reported on right now.
Right.
And in light of the comments from the MGC, my advice to the board is to focus on the two disciplines versus the broad-based approach that had been discussed in the past. But we can talk about that. Certainly when we have
But I guess I think what Mark was trying to suggest was before, so that we have some input into what the report eventually looks like. Did you look at this? Did you look at that?
No, I understand that part of it,
Yeah.
you're right, and I think we are going to do that, but I guess what I'm trying to do is set expectations about the report. I mean, they're not gonna be voluminous, spiral-bound reports, I mean, they're gonna be, I shouldn't say that. I just don't wanna think that we're getting something that is not really, it's more strategic information than, annals of
Right.
data analysis. So I agree with you, Alex, that they can come with a draft or something, but the input of the board on a more individualized basis could be helpful in doing that.
Okay.
And I can
I think
have
it's,
Debbie try and schedule those meetings.
Okay.
Richard,
Yeah, I would think that we really need to nail this timetable down here pretty quick, because our time is running out, and we can't be talking generalities anymore. I mean, we should by now have these people tell us when they're going to deliver the deliverables to us, even in a draft form or whatever, so we got review, because the way we're going to go through this, it's going to be laboriously long, too.
Yeah.
When we can only brief two of us at one time, and the whole process is
But
going to
was
be
it-
gummy.
Wasn't it, I wasn't at this meeting, but I understand that one of I think MRI had said that he was looking at the end of January to be able to produce something that could be used at arbitration, no?
well, I think, yeah.
I think a longer, stuff to inform a negotiating strategy, can be done, is being done.
Right.
Things that are more, as you know, things that get into more detail in preparation for a possible hearing, would take longer to produce, yes.
I mean, I guess, I could.
Again, I think he was managing expectations on that too, I don't know that.
Right, no, I mean, I guess what I'm just, you know, to your point, Richard, I mean, I don't want to be rushed. And this time crunch, you know, a lot of it is MGM, you know, and if we're not ready because we don't have the facts, then December 31st is going to pass by. I mean, at least in my view. So you know, but I do take your point about having a timetable and have some expectation of what we're going to see when.
Yeah, because I don't think anybody's going to shine brightly on us if we pass that 31st deadline.
No, but if MGM makes the conscious decision to not designate us in their application, that reflects very poorly in my mind on their approach, because I think what we heard last night truly affirms our status as a significantly and adversely impacted community.
Okay, well, I think they've already stated their position unless they retract. So I think we have to go based on, if they haven't retracted, then that is still their final binding offer at this point.
Well, also,
And we do have to get an offer up.
the ball is in our court. It's time for us to see what we can do in the way of the offer. And when it comes to the reporting, our experts are going to be there. This is a long process, which means they'll give us some preliminary information. If we don't come to an agreement and they have to prepare information for a hearing, that will be more. But these two groups, I think, are going to be with us for a while, because there will be some element of a reopener or look back, which means we will probably want to use them for our baseline data. And we'll probably bring them back in a year and 5 years. So I think it's a long-term relationship and multiple reports that we're going to be facing.
Let me just make one more point about the deadline, and this is, I'll say it's hypothetical. But there may be a surrounding community agreement that has already been signed that may have a provision. We saw a version of this early on that says, you know, if someone else gets more money, we'll give you more money too.
Right.
And say that communities, say Long Meadow feels like we are more impacted than that community and therefore would want a higher level of mitigation. MGM's incentive, you know, in that provision, that kicker provision, had, say, a December 31st timeframe, where if MGM gives somebody more money before December 31st, then this other community would get more money. Then MGM doesn't want to give more money to Long Meadow if we feel like, if we document that we are more adversely impacted and due for more mitigation, they're not going to want to do that because they don't want to pay another community again. So to some extent, driving this factor is if there's an agreement out there like that, it doesn't suit, it serves neither MGM nor us to settle this by December 31st.
Well, I think
don't
what we
follow
need
your
to do
logic
now,
on
I
that.
think right now we just need to concentrate on Long Meadow, figure out what is the best offer for Long Meadow based on our consultants, and move forward. I mean, I would just, the only thing we need to do is worry about what our next step is, which is, I think, put the offer out there.
Yeah, and I'd like to know a timetable, if we can figure that out. When are we going to get our reports from our experts?
Well, I understood they were going to be available next week. The exact date, we can follow up and see
But we're
where
going to have
they
the
think it
meetings
is.
first, right? We're going to have the meetings before the reports get issued. Are we
Well, there's
consensus around
going
that
to-
fact? Okay.
Yeah.
So sometime after we have the meetings, the reports will be delivered.
Well, there has to be some preliminary
Well, we can get a
material.
draft report to
Draft.
review. I want something to read before I have the meeting with the people. I don't want to
Yeah.
work in cold.
So there should be draft reports sometime next week, I understood. But I think the next thing that everyone on this board is we're going to get the environmental impact report, which is going to be huge, on Monday. And I'm not sure how we'll be able to get that to everybody,
It's usually on the website. It's usually on PVPC's website or state.
which will be
Or-
difficult to
or
download
How
or
much wants to
open.
read it?
Well, that's right.
And I'm sure you do too, Richard.
I will pick out
monster.
areas of.
1,400
I
pages.
think, I mean, what you'll find is that it deals predominantly with
Yeah, there you go.
the host community.
Is that going to be a live stream video? I like to watch those if it's.
What?
Is there going to be an actual presentation, or is it just going to be handed in?
I don't, my experience has been they just get submitted.
They just get submitted. Okay.
Do we have any definitive information on who is in the final throes of negotiations at this point?
No,
Hearsay.
Just all
No.
hearsay at this point?
just hearsay.
Okay.
Everyone is actively negotiating, though my understanding is Holyoke is not being considered a surrounding community.
Mhm.
So all the other 7 by
MGM.
MGM.
So they didn't even get an offer?
No, I don't believe they're in discussions with them. That was what I heard from the GPI meeting.
Mhm.
Everyone else is in active discussion with MGM. And Northampton is not considered part of the group either. So there are other communities that are out there, but the 7 communities are actively negotiating and moving forward.
And we do have a scheduled call with MGM tomorrow that they had asked for to continue the dialogue. So, you know, and I assume the directive is the same, just hear what they have to say, but make no substantive proposals.
I have a quick question on the MIPA process.
What is
You-
the,
yeah,
can I just,
go ahead.
what is the agenda on
They wanted to continue the dialogue about how we feel about this information and
Mm.
that? Oh, like the GPI?
And the MIPA process, since the Department of Transportation is very important that we figure out what they're doing, they're going to take the MIPA report, the report that's handed in, and they're going to review it and make recommendations. And is that the way it works? Comments? And is that usually done within a few days, or is this, what is the timeline usually on these?
It's been a while since I was involved in the MIPA process, so I don't remember the timelines, but I think there are timelines for comment.
For comment? Mhm. And, but.
And then when the secretary issues the permit, I think it's with conditions based on,
Yeah, because this is not in comments now, this is full.
this is the draft environmental impact
Is it a
report.
draft coming out, or is it the final?
Right, it's a DEIR, and then they get comments, and the EIR is issued.
Okay.
I think it's the same as the federal
Yeah,
one is essentially the
yeah.
same, and they issue, they say, here's your environmental permit
Right.
with the following conditions.
Right.
In fact, GPI said it was very important for Long Meadow to be registered on the comments so that we can see what's happening. Have we done that? I don't even know how to do that.
I need to double check, but I did submit that letter saying we want to be copied on all correspondence and the like. I don't know if that covered us for the EIR.
You might need to go on the website.
PVPC does get a copy and reviews the filing
Oh, okay.
as a part of its regular duties that it does. It does that for every project, so we already know PVPC will be getting a copy and reviewing it
Okay.
as well, so.
Well, we just need to be copied on all those comments. That's what I understood.
Mhm.
Paul?
Why would we want to have a conversation with MGM if, A, we're not prepared to make a counteroffer, B, they want our feelings on the result of that study? So, to me, just based on that one comment, it seems more like a fishing expedition on their part to see how we feel about these numbers, and why would we want to reveal anything of what we believe about this report that just came out? So, the last meeting we went into, that the town went into with MGM, there was no agenda, and I know we didn't get it because obviously Brandon didn't get one, our attorney didn't receive one, and we didn't get a copy of it, so there was no agenda. I don't know what I know Brandon sent out a status update on that, but why would we go into a conversation with them when we have nothing to talk about, nor should we talk about what our feelings are about that GPI report? Because from that, I would hope that the only thing, well, if I was on the other side of the table, I would want to know what my opponent was thinking and pick their brain about their thoughts about what they just saw. And I just think it's dangerous to go into meetings with them or have conversations with them when we don't have our data. And unless they're going to make another offer.
They might.
They might,
Well,
that's how it's been trending.
But wouldn't it be good to know that before we went on to a phone call with them?
Is that what?
Because
it is, a
I hope we're
phone
not
call?
going to talk
Yeah.
about what our experts or anybody thinks about that study that you just saw last
No,
night.
we don't know yet. So how could we talk about that? But I mean, to
But
some
that's the-
extent,
but
to some
isn't
extent,
that
this answers a question you asked last week. How do these deals get done outside of open session? It's through conversations and meetings like that, Paul.
And I think we have to always be willing to listen, and that we're good faith. I think that our attorneys will be very careful not to show the
I don't think not
hand.
having a conversation is not having good faith in negotiation. I think not having good faith in negotiation is not giving us all the data that we need to have our experts look at it. And so I don't agree that it's not be if we don't meet, it's acting in bad faith. And when you go into something like that, any negotiating session, I would hope that there's a strategy to go into that. And we're beyond the listening part, I think. I think the first couple of months and first couple of meetings, those were the listening tour type of thing to find out where they were. I mean, it is not a nice relationship. It's definitely adversarial.
I don't know if I'd say that.
I think
I mean, we're
that,
in negotiations.
Yeah.
We're statutorily compelled to be in negotiations, and so I guess what I would say is, I agree with you in that we're not doing the kind of, here's what we're all about, here's what our great project is going to look like, and then, the kind of sales job thing. I mean, we are compelled to negotiate. If we believe ourselves a surrounding community, then we have to be negotiating with them. These conversations are all a part of that process. I'm still clear on my directives, and there's really nothing for me to report to them anyway. But if they want to continue to dialogue on this, then I think I'm obligated. I think the board, we all are obligated to listen.
I think if you have concerns, you could call or send an email to Brandon, but Brandon will be the one in charge of the conversations or further
I
negotiations.
mean, if MGM's position on this is evolving as a result of the GPI study, I mean, I'd want to know that.
Somebody, we ought to mention, Paul, you may not be aware, MGM was there last night and wanted to film, and the committee said no, and they left. They had a representative that wanted to film the meeting, and it was put to open board, and the board basically said no, they didn't
The
want to.
PVPC board?
No, the
No.
group, the whole group of us in there.
Yeah, but the meeting was covered by the reminder.
Yeah, it was covered by the reminder.
So it was not like a secret,
That's right.
double secret probation meeting. It was,
But MGM was denied the access to record the meeting as it unfolded.
and they were not present for the meeting.
And they were not
Yes.
present.
So on Monday, we will try to get the link to you for the environmental impact report. Brandon will probably be sending you out another, follow-up on tomorrow's phone call, and then we will try to get a timeline from Municipal Resources and also Parsons on when an initial draft will get to people, so we can start setting up the meetings.
Well, I think our lawyer, is our lawyer taking the lead on that? Is he the chief coordinator on this data, or?
Oh, I would say no. He's going to be waiting to get it too.
Okay,
So
who's the
Stephen,
chief coordinator then?
Stephen.
Okay, then fine, and I would like to see some sort of schedule placed before us, so we've got a general idea when these steps are gonna take place. Because right now, we're shooting maybe Tuesday, maybe Thursday. I wanna see us start to nail it down. The timetable is getting down, as Alex has alluded to, and I think now it's time for us to be serious on our timetable. And we can no longer allow 5 or 6 days to slip by.
All right, so Stephen, if you could get to them and let us know, and then, as I said, I'm setting up a meeting for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I'll try to be cognizant of people's schedule, and as soon as I know we're not going to have any more information, I'll let you know when we're canceling the meeting. And we're going to try to have all of those meetings here because LCTV's requested, and it makes it easier for them in the filming. Any other requests or questions? Okay. Well, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.